priest of the dead. The first voice rose from the ground on a night without stars. Father Mateo had been kneeling beside an unmarked grave at the edge of San Lazaro Cemetery, his breath misting in the cold, his Cossack soaked through from rain that felt heavier than weather should. He was no longer a priest in the eyes of the church, not after the trial. Still, habit bent his knees to prayer, even when faith no longer answered. That was when the earth spoke. "Forgive me." The words slid upward through the soil, damp and broken, as though pushed through clenched teeth. Mateo froze. His hands trembled against the rosary, beads slick with rain. He told himself it was grief, or madness, or the echo of guilt he carried like a second spine. He stood to leave. "Please," the voice whispered again. "I am still burning." Mateo staggered back, breath sawing in his chest. The grave before him was old, centuries perhaps, its stone eroded into anonymity. No candle burned nearby. No living mouth could have shaped those words. He ran. By morning, he told himself he would forget. But as dawn thinned the darkness, the whispers followed him. Threading through the streets, rising from beneath cobblestones, clinging to church walls like mildew, confessions, not spoken from lips, but breathed from bone and rot in memory. "I killed him in anger. I lied in God's name. I loved her and let her die. I wore the cloth and fed on fear." Mateo collapsed in his rented room, hands over his ears, but the voices did not need air. They bloomed inside him, heavy and intimate, as if the dead had been waiting years for someone who could finally hear. By the third night, he returned to the cemetery. If this was damnation, he would meet it standing. The graves opened their mouths. They told him everything. Men who had taken bribes and baptized them as a necessity. Women who had poisoned rivals and died praised as saints. Priests, too many priests, whose sins had been buried beneath incense and authority. Their confessions never spoken, never absolved, sealed by fear of scandal rather than love of God. The dead were not screaming, they were pleading. "Say the words," they begged. "We cannot cross while we are unheard." Mateo knew the words. He had spoken them thousands of times before his fall, but the church had stripped him of his collar for forgiving the unforgivable, for choosing mercy over doctrine. When a dying man confessed to sins, Rome deemed beyond absolution. "You have no authority," they had said. The dead disagreed. Kneeling in the mud, rain soaking him to the bone, Mateo raised trembling hands and spoke the right. "I absolve you." The ground shuddered, the air warmed. A weight lifted, not from him, but from the earth itself. The whisper faded into silence that felt like rest. Words spread, as such things do, not through speech but through absence. Graves that no longer moaned. Shadows that no longer lingered. The cemetery grew quiet in a way it had never been. Still the voices came. From mass graves, from forgotten battlefields, from beneath churches built over lies too heavy to excavate. Mateo became a pilgrim of the dead. He walked where the living would not, absolving sins the church had forbidden him to touch. Each forgiveness carved something from him. Sleep, appetite, certainty, but gave peace in return. Until one night, a voice rose that he knew too well. "My son." The grave before him bore no name, but he recognized the cadence, the careful authority wrapped in gentleness. Cardinal Ruiz. The man who had defrocked him, the man who had died revered his funeral draped in gold. "I did what I must," the voice whispered. "The church must endure." Mateo's hands shook. "You silenced victims," Mateo said. "You buried truth." "For God," the voice replied. "For order." The ground grew cold. The whispers around them fell silent, waiting. Mateo closed his eyes. For the first time, he hesitated. If he absolved this sin, he would forgive the lie that had broken him. If he refused, he would become what the church had accused him of being. He spoke anyway. Not the absolution, the truth. "You are not forgiven," Mateo said softly. "Not yet," the earth screamed. The grave collapsed inward, swallowing the voice, sealing it in its own weight. The ground stilled. The dead did not protest. That night, Mateo understood. Absolution was not erasure. It was reckoning. He rose, exhausted, emptied, and strangely whole. Dawn crept over the cemetery, pale and unsure, as if even the sun were waiting to see what kind of priest he had become. Mateo walked on. Wherever the dead whispered, he listened. Wherever truth was buried, he uncovered it. And when the living church finally came for him, demanding silence, the graves would already be empty. And forgiven souls would no longer need his voice.